Hi everyone, welcome to this week's video. Today I thought that I would do a tag video. I've never done one of those before. I feel like they also are kind of like old school YouTube, so I just thought it would be fun to do one. I saw Sarah Rose Beauty do this one maybe like a month or two ago, and it was a eyeshadow palette tag that was started by ChicGeekMakeup. So I thought this would also be a good way to kind of share more about my palette collection without doing an entire collection overview video. If you would be interested in seeing a tour of my whole makeup collection, then leave me a comment below and let me know that. Otherwise, you can generally see most of my collection in my Shop My Stash videos. So without further ado, let's get into this palette tag. So the first question in this tag is to share a palette that you wore for a special occasion. And the one that comes to mind is the ABH Modern Renaissance palette. I've had this palette for many, many years. It was one of the first, I think it was the first one of the ABH palettes that I bought. And, I didn't always have a super high budget for makeup, so buying a palette like this was a really big deal to me. It's still a big deal, but at the time this was kind of one of my nicer high-end palettes that I had, and so I definitely enjoyed using it for special occasions. I love the pinks and like the neutrals in this palette, and I remember when I was dating my husband, when we were dating, we went out to a couple of nice dinners here and there, and I remember being really excited to use this palette. Especially I used some of these like hot pink colors and kind of made like a ombre look on my face or on my eyes, and so that I remember being really excited to try out and have this palette to use. So I would consider that a special occasion, and it's also just some like good memories to look back on. The next question in the tag is a palette that you like that you feel like is repetitive. And mine is the Urban Decay Naked Ultimate Basics. I really like this palette. I probably will always keep this in my collection until it starts to not perform as well anymore, because it's really good to just have every basic neutral color in a matte version. And I know it may not look repetitive here, but honestly, on the eyes, most of these kind of all look the same once they're blended out. But it doesn't really matter to me. I like having this as an option. They're all in one place. A lot of my palettes, they will have like a matte blending shade, but sometimes it's just not quite the right shade for the look you're going for, or you want something a little more on the pink side or a little more on the brown side. I like how this has this almost like burnt, like brick color in here too, and a couple of grays. So I think this palette it's nice. I don't even know if they sell the big version of this anymore. I know they have mini versions, and I used to have one of those, but again, it was the same thing. I was like, even though this only has 5 or 6 shades in it, 4 of them on the eyes kind of all look the same once they're blended together, and so it didn't really feel worth keeping in my collection for myself when I had this. But I still enjoy this, and I use this pretty often to pull a matte color here and there, but I do feel like a lot of them do look the same on the eyes, and it's quite repetitive. The next question is a palette where you feel like you got your money's worth. And I definitely feel like the Profusion Mauves palette is one where I have definitely gotten my money's worth. This palette is like $5 or $10 at Walmart, and you get huge pans, you get all these colors, and all of them have performed amazing for me. I also really love, particularly in this Mauves palette, that I have used a couple of these shades as blushes as well. So I like that it's also a multi-use palette. I'm really excited to pull this out as we get more into fall. I know most people probably think of this more as like a February, Valentine's Day, and maybe even spring look, but I feel like some of these darker shades will be really fun to use in fall. So definitely something to check out. I think you can probably also get these on the Profusion website. I don't know, I'll try and link that below. But I have found most of my Profusion products at Walmart, and yeah, they're really inexpensive, but you get big pans, lots of product, and quality pigment. This also pretty much answers the next question, is one where you feel like the palette is a deal. And it's this one again. It's, like I said, it's so inexpensive. You get a lot of colors, a lot of mattes and shimmers, big pans, and really good color payoff. So definitely this one's a good deal, and you get your money's worth. The next question is kind of hard. It's show a quad that you have that you wish was a larger palette. And honestly, I don't have a lot of quads in my collection, and some of the mini palettes that I have do come in larger sizes, so I don't really know if that's really answering the question. But I thought I would just share the quads that I do have are all the e.l.f. bite-size quads, and this is the one in cream and sugar. And this is one that I actually feel like would make a really pretty larger palette. And honestly, I think that's what draws me into the new Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. It's giving me these vibes. It's every nude, but like lots of shimmers and like good combinations that you would need to create any sort of neutral look. So I know that like those are two end of the extremes on like the price scale. This is a $4 product, and the Natasha Denona is going to be like a $70, $80 product. But this is one where if e.l.f. made larger palettes that had this exact formula in them, I would be tempted to try it if there was one that was kind of a dupe or competing with the Natasha Denona in this like nude color scheme. Next is a eyeshadow palette where you love the product but you hate the packaging. And mine is gonna have to be Natasha Denona, their mini palettes. I love these so much, but as I've shown before, this is my mini Biba. The packaging, it totally has cracked off, and for something that you're paying a decent amount of money for, just these little 5-pan ones are like 30 bucks. I want better packaging. I want this to last. I feel like it's because it's the plastic and the hinge, and you know, it's just inevitable after a number of times of opening and closing it. It's just going to wear down and eventually crack and break off. I wish maybe it was, I don't know, I guess plastic is considered more of a luxury product than something like Sigma has kind of the cardboard ones, but honestly, these last better because they open and close easier and have the magnetic closure. So I would almost rather have it be something like that, although I do like that I can see the color of the shades through it, so I know which one I'm pulling out. But you could do the same as something like this, just have the color of the outer packaging be different. I don't know. That's just me being picky, and I've just been so annoyed that, because this one broke pretty early on too. Like, this is my most used and most loved Natasha Denona mini palette, but the packaging broke so early on that I was just like, really? Like, now this is how it's gonna have to spend the rest of its life in my collection, is just kind of broken and floating around. So that's just a gripe that I have. The next question I can't really answer because it's show your dream palette in singles. I actually don't have any single eyeshadows. I've never been really drawn to that because I know myself and I don't ever pull for a single shadow on its own or a bunch of them. I just need them to already be in some sort of palette, and I know I could make my own palette with singles if I wanted. I'm just not interested in that. It's something that does not appeal to me. So I can skip that question and move on to the next one, which is palettes that you like to combine together. And honestly, I like to combine a lot of my palettes together, but I would say the ones that I combine the most often are all my ABH palettes. So like, sometimes if I'm feeling soft glam, it does lean a lot more like pink and brown. And so then maybe I'll want to pull in something from Sultry that's a little cooler. So I don't know, I combine like these a lot because I feel like some of the pinks and the golds can kind of complement each other well, but be, you know, either a little warmer or a little cooler, but I need both palettes to kind of create that look. So I have, let's see, I have 4 ABH palettes. I have Sultry, I have Modern Renaissance like I showed before, I have Soft Glam, and then I have Norvina, which is also one of my favorites. Although I do find I need to get more use out of this, and purples kind of stump me a little bit, but I'm intrigued to kind of figure out how to make those work on my eyes. Yeah, those are the 4 ABH palettes that I own, and I like the formula and I like all of them, and they've always performed really well for me. Again, the next question is kind of hard. It's a large palette that you wish was a small palette, and honestly, I buy a lot of small palettes anyway because I don't want the large version. So I've done that with a couple of the Sigma palettes. So I have the Sigma Enchanted mini version, and same with Ambiance, the Sigma Ambiance mini palette. And I just feel like I prefer that in a lot of cases because even though like the Ambiance palette, I feel like I would have used the big palette, I just felt like some of the colors were a little repetitive and I could get the same look with the mini version. So I guess that's me kind of cheating and answering the question that like I don't like I don't want any of my ABH palettes to be smaller. I like all the colors in them and I use them all. And beyond those, most of my palettes are mini. So that's just something I guess I am more aware of and that I think of when I'm shopping for eyeshadow palettes. Here's the Enchanted mini version. Is that, you know, in the past I have owned some larger palettes. Like I did, you know, back in the day when it was popular to have the huge palettes like from ColourPop and like Morphe, and I feel like there was another one, BH Cosmetics, I feel like everybody had. I never really got into those because I just was overwhelmed with how many color options there were. So I've always kind of gravitated towards the smaller palettes anyway, the mini versions or the 5 or 6 pan. And then my larger ones have never been anything really bigger than like an ABH or a Naked palette. So honestly, I'm pretty happy with the size of the palettes that I have. Nothing is too overwhelming and there's not like too many options in one place for me to choose from, if that makes sense. So that's me kind of answering the question, but not really at the same time. Okay, and then the last question is an eyeshadow palette you have that you wish had a matching face palette. That's also a really hard one. I feel like, honestly, there's not a palette out there, but they do have a lot of face palette or face product options that would go with this. It's the Milani Luminoso palette. And, you know, I do have the blush, but I feel like it would be really cool to see what they would choose as like a bronzer and a highlight to go with this look. And this is a color story that I also really enjoy, especially like in spring and summer. Just all these peachy pink colors I think just look so good in the spring and summer. I'll link a video below of me using this palette when I purchased it, what was that, 6-7 months ago. But yeah, this is one where, like I said, there are face products in the Milani line, but if they put them in like a palette form, I think it would just be interesting to see. They would obviously choose the Luminoso blush, but it would be interesting to see what the choices that they would make would be for the bronzer and the highlight. So that is all the questions for this palette tag. I hope that kind of gave you some insight into the types of palettes that I have in my collection and that I like to use on a regular basis. As I said, I feel like I'm pretty happy with my palette collection right now. It's not too overwhelming. I don't have too many choices. I do have my eyes on a few palettes that I might want to purchase maybe during the holidays, but all in all, I'm pretty happy with my palette collection and I enjoyed sharing some more information about it with you. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you in next week's video for my Project Pan update. Talk to you then. Bye.